At the back of the big thick book on page 433, the last aspect talks about the roadmap for the future of TAFE SA and describes says that TAFE SA started delivering the actions in 23-24 and has reflected them in its strategic plan. Is the Minister able to identify what work was done in that time on legislation to change the way that TAFE SA operates, and if he's able to provide information to the House on when we are going to see that legislation and consider it, that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Member for Morialta. Happy to give you an update on the roadmap to the future, which was a piece of work, as you said, undertaken by Jenny Ray, and a significant amount of work has been done already to progress. I think what were 96 recommended actions that came from the roadmap, and we have been considering all of those. I can give you an update on those recommendations that are currently being actioned, and they include, as you foreshadowed in your question, consulting or changing the TAFE SA Act. So TAFE SA and Skills SA are working collaboratively to consult across government and progress a proposal to me for ultimately consideration by Cabinet. So I don't foresee that will be a long way away. I'm hoping we have that quite soon for consideration, and then depending what happens through that process, I hope to have something in this place around changing the TAFE SA Act and hopefully bringing to life some of the recommendations that Ms Ray made in her roadmap report. The Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan, TAFE's in the final stages of the Innovate RAP with Reconciliation Plan with Reconciliation Australia, shared use of TAFE SA campuses to benefit local communities, which was a recommendation I was pleased to receive. TAFE SA continues to engage with the Mount Barker District Council to negotiate the terms of a service level agreement over the management of the campus grounds. Engagement continues with the City of Noarlunga to negotiate the terms of leases for office space and the community library. A regional university study hub at Victor Harbour is being developed with regional development. I'm told it's now being launched, which is good, with RDA, Regional Development Australia, for the Adelaide Hills, Fleurieu and Kangaroo Island. Yes, the hub was due to open and did open on the 19th of September this year. Student engagement hubs, the physical ones. The lead professional services contractors engaged by Ventia have completed Berry, Tonsley and Victor Harbour in July of this year. Port Pirie due for completion September this year. I'm not sure if that has been done or not to our knowledge. Whyalla due for completion this month. Student engagement hub at Mount Gambier is currently in the planning phase with internal design requests being considered. No due date has currently been set for the completion of a student engagement hub at Mount Gambier. Regional delivery. Government delivered on its commitment to increase regional delivery by establishing the Regional Skills Development Fund in January of this year in support of the delivery of an additional 41 courses in regional SA as of the 23rd of May. Without that funding, it is estimated by TAFE that only 18 regional courses would have been offered over this time, so a pretty significant increase of 23 additional courses being offered at TAFE campuses in regional South Australia, thanks to that RSDF funding that flowed from the budget in 2023, I think it was. TAFE SA has consulted with TAFE SA's Regional Skills Advisory Committees to inform regional course delivery. TAFE SA is also continuing to grow opportunities for regional engagement in 2024-2025. So I won't go on. There's more updates if you would like. I'm happy to provide you.
Thank you, Minister. Specifically just on the legislation that the Minister mentioned was going to be considered by Cabinet, is it anticipated that it will be going to Cabinet for approval to go more broadly for consultation, or is the Minister's consultation, presumably directed consultation, already happened, and the assumption is then it will go from Cabinet straight to the Parliament?
Thank you, Member from Morialta. Yes, I just had a chat with the Chief Executive about that. My anticipation as Minister is that once it gets to Cabinet, and depending on what happens through that process, there will be further consultation and public consultation after that as well.
My last question on this matter, when will that public consultation, when is the TAFE or the Minister anticipating that public consultation will take place and therefore its introduction into Parliament?
Member from Morialta, I think the fastest that we would have it out would be this year for public consultation, but I think it may more likely be the start of next year, I think, but not far away.
Same page, sir, but above the roadmap refers to the bolder future, but it also refers to the fee-free courses which commenced in January 2023. There's been some media speculation around completion rates on those courses. There was a newspaper article I'm aware of which I think referred to the national program, and I believe that there was a TAFE SA representative on local radio who provided a different figure. Presuming that the completion rate depends on which courses are included and whether they're due to have completed, is the Minister able to provide whatever the most up-to-date information is on what are the completion rates for those courses for which we can identify a completion rate under the fee-free TAFE program?
Thank you, Member from Morialta. Yes, I'm aware of the article, which I read, and you're right that a representative from TAFE appeared on, I think it might have been David Bevan's program, and answered some questions around that article. I'm not entirely clear how the data that appeared in that national article was found or released, because it's very different to the data that we obviously keep locally in TAFE, and I'm happy to take you through what I am advised by TAFE. So in terms of the fee-free TAFE cohort, the completion rate that we have currently is about 45%. That is above, I think, the completion rate in TAFE outside of fee-free TAFE, which is 40%. And then the current withdrawal rate for the fee-free TAFE cohort in South Australia is 12.5% compared to 22.5% for non-FFT fee-free TAFE subsidised students over the same period. So it is higher for both in fee-free TAFE, which I am, of course, very pleased about. I think that... Yes, the FFTs, that's right. Of course, that 40% figure for completions of TAFE students outside the fee-free TAFE cohort has come up, and I don't have them in front of me unless the Chief Executive does, has come up in the last few years, I think from as low as 32 upwards to now 40%, which is really pleasing to see that, because I've made many public comments about the need for us to improve the completion rate, and was glad to see that the most recent NCEVA data we had showed a 2.9% increase for South Australia, which is good. We're seeing that in TAFE outside fee-free TAFE as well, but we are seeing, which I think is, given the levels of disadvantage amongst students who go to TAFE generally, which is quite high, but then from the data that I have seen, it would suggest that the levels of disadvantage based on where students in South Australia are accessing, or where they live when they go to access fee-free TAFE, is also very high. The fact that so far we are getting 45%, which is above TAFE's 40%, and a dropout of just 12.5 below the 22.5, I think is a very promising sign. Obviously, it's relatively early days because it takes time for the throughput, so those who commence to get through and complete. So I'm not suggesting that this is, I'm not going to hop on a helicopter and land on a aircraft carrier with mission accomplished hats just yet. There's a lot more to go, but at least at this no, that doesn't work. At this stage, it's promising signs.
Minister, provide the aggregate data, the numbers that sit behind that 45% figure that he's just cited, and perhaps whatever the other numbers are in relation to those for whom we do not yet have completion rates. Happy for it to be taken on notice if he wishes.
That on notice. Happy to take that on notice and come back to you with as much of that detail as we can put together for you.
Thank you. I'll move to a different page. We'll keep moving. On page 426, at the beginning of the TAFE run, it's identified by the Auditor General that land and buildings were revalued upwards by $316 million, which must have been a very exciting development for whoever pays council rates in the TAFE SA organisation, and that this was TAFE SA's first revaluation of land and buildings since 2019. I assume you do pay council rates? I have to find that out. Anyway, I'm wondering if it's possible to disaggregate where those increases were found. Is it possible to provide, in relation to the hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property that TAFE SA owns, is it possible to disaggregate how much each of those various campuses that TAFE SA owns has been valued at?
We'll come back to you with as much detail as we can. Happy to do that. The advice that I've got on that, though, is that, as you pointed out, the valuation, which was the first since 2019, resulted in an increase in land and building values by $316 million, which is obviously a lot. I think it was over 24 separate properties. This probably not come as a surprise to the member for Morialta, but the advice I have is that it was market conditions which largely contributed to the large cost in the valuation. Nonetheless, I'm happy to try, we'll try to disaggregate that as best we can across, I think, the 24 separate properties that were part of that valuation and provide that data to you if we can.
Thank you. The line after it says funding from the Department for Education increased to $243 million. Would I be right to assume that that's from Skills SA, which would now be under DSD, but under the financial year in question was the Department for Education?
I'm told that is correct.
Thank you, that makes sense. On page 429, the Auditor makes note that there were 54 hourly paid instructors who started work without having a signed contract, compared to 26 over 10 months in the 2022-23 year, so a significant increase then. The Auditor has recommended that TAFE SA, amongst other things, implement controls to prevent HPIs starting work before a valid contract's in place, with a particular focus on business units with higher non-compliance rates. So, two questions, I guess. Which are the business units that have higher non-compliance rates? And is the Minister going to be able to bring down this number that has so significantly increased over the previous year?
Thank the member for Morialta for the question. Yes, you're right. There's been a long-standing issue around the commencement of hourly paid instructors without contracts. After a number of years of improvements in terms of the percentage of HPIs commencing with a contract in place, we saw a deterioration in that compliance, which is an issue that I've discussed at great length with the team from TAFE. And part of it is, of course, due to the fact that TAFE is growing for the first time in quite a long time in terms of enrolments. That means more staff are needed and some growing pains come along with that. Nonetheless, I'm not making an excuse for us not being compliant, but the Chief Executive informs me that post a new process which has been put in place post the data published in the Auditor General's report, the contracts that have been processed since that, we are at 100%. So we are confident that the new process which has been put in place should rectify the non-compliance issue. And so far, since that process has been put in place, we are seeing promising signs. In terms of the second part of your question around finding out specifically which units or business units of TAFE are the least compliant, we'll see what we can do and come back to you with that data if we can. But I feel more confident now that we have something in place which I hope will put to bed those compliance issues that we have seen.
Move to education.